If you've never come across anything written by Satoshi Mizukami, then you are most certainly missing out. He's been a manga writer of semi-cult status in the West for years now, but has never really received a ton of recognition for his work. Mostly because none of his works have been adapted into anime, despite 2 of them being heralded as modern masterpieces. For years, Mizukami fans like myself have been begging for an anime adaptation of one of his works, but to no avail. However, it appeared that our prayers were finally answered in the past summer season in the form of Planet With, a multimedia franchise including a 12-episode anime with Mizukami in the lead writer's chair. When the anime finally premiered, it was met with the exact reaction I expected, that being that nobody really got it and thought it was just kinda weird, but as the season went on, it gained a loyal audience in the same way that Mizukami's other works typically do, ultimately ending with many AniTubers calling it their anime of the year. As for me, well, I assume you saw the title of this video before you clicked on it, but let's get into some specifics, which means we have to understand what Mizukami's style entails. If I had to boil down the basics of Mizukami's long-form writings, I would highlight at least 3 major points. The first is that all of his characters are usually given very specific personal traumas or hang-ups to overcome. This is something that Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer is especially good at and is woven throughout its entire narrative, from Amamiya's disquieting relationship with his dead grandfather to Samidare's struggle with terminal illness. Spirit Circle also conveys this idea through its reincarnation gimmick. Every past iteration of Futa and Koko's lives have interacted in different ways, leading to different results that usually end in some kind of disaster, and these 2 must eventually overcome their past selves in order to reach a brighter future. This concept is thankfully still present in Planet With, but mostly just in the first half. Granted, it is really good in that first half. We get a wide array of characters who each have their own issues to work through that are brought to the forefront of their psyche when they attack the UFOs, with Miyu and Harumi being particularly well written. It does carry over into the second half a little bit, but there are a lot of other much bigger problems with the second half that I'll have to address in a bit, so we'll say that in regards to characters, Planet With is definitely what I would expect from Mizukami. I was especially fond of how, instead of keeping all of Soya's memories a secret until near the end, they have him remember a good chunk of it by the end of the first episode, but still keep that information a secret from the audience so as to make his motives all the more mysterious and interesting. The second aspect of Mizukami's style is the pervasiveness of death. No, I'm not saying that his works are particularly violent or brutal. What I'm saying is that people die when they are killed in a Mizukami manga, even major characters that you thought would be important to the story, and their deaths have a huge impact on everyone around them. This is something that I often find absent from even the best action manga, and it's that human element, that pulsating ball of empathy that really resonates in Mizukami's works. Death doesn't just happen and is then over with. People need time to grieve, and different people need different amounts of time to come to terms with the loss of a close friend, something that Biscuit Hammer understands all too well. Spirit Circle takes this concept even further and pushes it to its limits. What if you had to deal with not just your own lifetime of pain over the losses you experience, but also the pain of your past lives? What happens when a mistake you made in a past life haunts you until seemingly the end of time, forcing you to confront the same person you've wronged or been wronged by over and over again until you get it right? While it might sound like a purely fantasy-driven concept, the way Mizukami presents it makes Futa's struggles feel all too real and all too similar to events that we've dealt with in our own lives, not just regarding death, but the entire human experience as well. While Mizukami is still well versed in the extreme emotions that come standard with pop storytelling, he's also more prolific with a more subtle batch of feelings and what they mean to the story overall. Mild annoyance that boils over into resentment, a small bit of bliss amidst the tormenting slog of exhaustion. These are real, genuine emotions that many people feel every day, and it's through these emotions that humans feel and relate to each other on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, death has very little presence in Planet With. There are a few instances, but not many that leave much impact. It happened as part of Soya's tragic backstory, the old man dies off screen because he was old, and the dragon dies at the end after he's forgiven. But none of these really leave an impact like they did in Mizukami's other works. The only human character to die in the course of progressing the plot is Takashi, and he was an antagonist for his entire run, so it's not nearly as impacting, though it is still impacting to some degree, and had the story continued with this concept, the weight of his and potentially other deaths could have created an interesting dilemma for Soya, but sadly, no such thing happens. I emphasize this point because having death in a story reminds us that these characters are human. If you refuse to kill off characters because they're popular or you like them too much, then it adds this air of metatextual artificiality that ultimately hurts your story. Humans die, sometimes unjustly or without warning. The first major death in Biscuit Hammer hit me insanely hard because there was no lead up to it. It just happened, and the characters had to deal with the fact that someone they cared about was suddenly gone forever. Planet With is just kinda missing this element of mortality that is so pervasive throughout Mizukami's works. However, I think what Planet With's biggest problem is comes from the final element of Mizukami's style, in that it lacks a clear through line from start to finish. What I mean by this is that Mizukami's works, while often morally ambiguous in some areas, are typically very simple in a structural sense. A clear and understandable conflict is presented at the beginning that will eventually be resolved by the end, and everything in the middle builds upon that conflict and provides insight into how it will be solved. In Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer, a giant hammer created by a space wizard is going to destroy Earth, and our dual protagonists have to stop it before it does because they want to destroy the Earth first, and the question of will they still try to destroy the Earth at the end is slowly built upon. Without giving too much away, they do reach a decision at the end and resolve the exact conflict that was created at the beginning. In Spirit Circle, Coco wants to kill Futa because of things that happened in their past lives, and so Futa must convince her not to. In order to do that, he must traverse his reincarnations and uncover what Fortuna, one of his past lives, did to warrant such a grudge, and all of the stuff in between builds upon that conclusion. So what then is the central conflict of Planet With? Well, at first, it's that the Sealing faction wants to limit Earth's potential to prevent destruction, and these guys here are the main group that stand opposed to Soya. Soya is still missing some of his memories, and it seems as though those memories are the key to figuring all this out. So uncovering his memories and preventing the Earth from being sealed seems like the endgame. Then halfway through the series, the main antagonist dies and the rest of them split off into different factions. The Sealing faction is still the opposition, but now it's focused on a somewhat different set of characters with slightly different goals. Then, by the climax of the series, which is after like a 2-year time skip, Soya has joined forces with the Sealing faction to defeat a giant space dragon that's going to destroy Earth. And then, at the very end, it becomes about forgiveness and letting go of past grudges, like how Soya forgives the dragon for destroying his homeworld. In the span of 12 episodes, we've gone through 3.5-ish goals for our protagonists to reach. And so, with the exception of the first one that spanned the entire first half, reaching those goals doesn't feel nearly as strong as defeating Animus or confronting Coco. I've seen a lot of people compare Planet With's structure to Gurren Lagann, and I do see where they're coming from, but Gurren Lagann had 27 episodes, more than enough time to flesh out all of its arcs. Planet With only had 12, and the plot went in so many directions in such a short amount of time that it just kinda lost its impact. Look, I'm not saying Planet With is bad. I think it's a good show with a lot of interesting ideas, and if you've never read any Mizukami before, then Planet With was probably really exciting for you, and that's okay. I, however, expect much more from who I would probably consider my favorite manga author at this point. Every time I picked up a new volume of Biscuit Hammer or Spirit Circle, it shook me to my core and reminded me how important great storytelling is. Would I recommend Planet With? Probably, but only with the caveat that you would also try out Biscuit Hammer and Spirit Circle to see what Mizukami is really capable of. In any case, I'll hold on to hope for the next big Mizukami project, and maybe dive into his backlog a bit for some hidden gems that will hopefully satisfy me much more. Fortunately, this year has also given me a work from one of my new favorite anime directors that not only lived up to expectations, but far surpassed them to create one of the most masterful works of animation to air this year. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourke Tenjoin, Christine Seibert, Tim Johnson, Call Me Catlord, Diane Wierzbicki, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.